Hello everyone. In this session we're going to talk about the expense section. So expense is one of the very important area that we have to record and categorize the expense, and we have to understand the difference between the expense and the bills. So it's very important to categorize in the right way. For example, if we buy something, if you buy postage, if you buy envelope, if we buy something and pay for that immediately, we categorize this one as the expense. But when we buy something from the supplier and we create a bill because we don't pay the supplier immediately, so we need to know like how it works. So the very basic understanding is, if we buy something and we pay for that immediately, we just record the expense and which account we paid for. And if we buy something from the supplier, so we need to make sure this supplier already exists on our account. So this supplier already have to be on your system on the QuickBook, and if you don't have it, you can always create the new one. For example, if you click on the expense, we're going to see two sections: expense and the supplier. So all the expense category you can see here, the POI name category, memo, and the amount and everything. And on the supplier section, we'll be able to see how many supplier we have. If we like to add a new supplier, we can always do that by clicking the new supplier on the right top, or we can import the supplier. For example, if we have a lot of supplier, we can always have the option we can import everything from the Excel. So let's have a look the expense section. The first thing we're going to see here on the expense section, on the right corner, you're going to see the drop down, and from there will be a few options that may be helpful for us to find the right category. So let's have a look. We have a time activity. This is like to see when the bills is due, all of this. Then you have a bill. So this is for the supplier. If you buy something from the supplier, we can create a bill so that we know when the bill is due, and after that, when you make the payment from the bank, we can actually reconcile this transaction. Import the bill. If you have a lot of bill, we can do reconciliation. Expense, we can see for what we paying from which account, and check, purchase order, supplier credit, and pay down credit card. So supplier credit is all about when the supplier have some credit with you. For example, you buy something from your supplier and you return that, and supplier said, okay, we give you some credit, so you have some credit on the supplier account. So later on, if you like to buy something from the supplier, maybe you don't have to pay for that, you just use that credit. Let's look at the first one, that is the bill. This is the most two important area you're going to see, bill and the expense. So if we click the bill, so the bill option will be open. The way we record all the invoice for the customer, the same way we record all the information for our supplier when you buy something and you create the bills. So we'll see a few information that we need to record in order to complete the bill. So the bill will always refer it as a bill, so you can see here. And also we need to see like from which supplier we're buying from. So let's say we choose a supplier. If you don't have the supplier on listed on the drop down, you can always add a supplier by clicking add new supplier, and you can enter the terms and condition, like is the VAT inclusive, exclusive, or how many days after the bills will be due, all of this. Next one we have, like, let's say choose one of the supplier, Bank of any city. So we have this supplier, Bank of any city, and after that the mailing address and everything will become. The terms normal is 30 days, but if you like to change it, you can always do that. So let's say net is 30 days. So if you buy something from the supplier, we have to pay to the supplier within 30 days. Then the bill number, so we have to put the bill number, let's say 1234, and the location, you can add the location, let's say Essex. And then we have to see what did we buy from the supplier, so why we are paying for, why creating the bill. So we have to choose the category. So let's say category which says maybe continuing education. So let's just choose this one, continuing education. And if you like to some description, you can always write that. So we can say educations, and the amount, let's say it is £1,000. And the VAT information always like will tell you how many types of VAT. You can delete that. If you don't need more, you can always delete that, remember that. Okay, so here we can see the VAT. So VAT could be inclusive, and inclusive it could be exempted. We have to choose. So if I say the VAT is our 20% standard, and we have to select the class. Now this is obviously like this class. If you don't have the class, you can always add the new one to find it out what class it is. So let's say if I said it is for the employees, this education. Now of course, like the next section, you have to tell the item details. So item categories will help us to identify what type of expense it is. On the other hand, we have the item details. So let's say product or service. So what sort of product and service we are buying from the supplier. So let's try to find. So let's say employee training, and this is the description. It's a quantity 1, rate, let's say so 1000, and the class, we choose another class, let's say employees. Now we have a category details and we have a item details. Now you can see here, like it is possible one bill can have a obviously like what category it is, you can insert there, and also it could be a product or service. Now obviously if you just buy the product, you can just enter the product. If you buy the service, you can enter the service as well. So if you think like, okay, this is, I don't need like the item details, and I just need to clear it, so you can always do that. So it will clear the line, so it will give you like how much you just paying for this this category. Now the reason it is very important to understand and find this thing because until we know it how to categorize it, it will go to the wrong place. So let's try to understand a little bit more. Alright, let's try to understand a little bit other way. So when we have expense, it is possible the expense could be the direct expense, could be indirect expense. For example, if we have a rent, heat and lighting, and advertising, all the overheads is indirect cost. On the other hand, we have a, for example, if you buy something, product or raw material, that could be the direct cost. So for that reason, you see in the QuickBook we have a two type of categories here. So one, we have a category details and we have a item details. Let's try to understand and try to find it out the difference between these two. So let's say I choose a supplier, so Bank of any city, and terms is 30 days for the bills. Remember, any sort of bills will create the creditor. So if I create a bills, that means I have to pay to my supplier within 30 days, 15 days, whatever it is. Let's make a bill number 222, and here I'm making two things. I have saying the category is continuous education or whatever I choose. So I can see the category is expense. So this is my overhead, it will go to the expense. So I choose this one, and let's say amount is £1,000 with the VAT is 1,200. So it is, I'm putting the category the class for the employee. So this training is for the employee. And on the other hand, let's say the product and service, I can choose anything. Let's say I choose let's choose a water bottle, for example, and I choose 1,000. Let's say I choose rate is 100, and I choose like £100, and the VAT is again inclusive. So I can say the VAT is standard rate, and you can say VAT rate standard 20%. Okay, so now we can see we have £1,100 total, and the total VAT on 1,100 is our 220. So total is 1,320. One for the continuing education expense and one for the product, that's water bottle. Now I like to see what is the transaction journal for that. So once we're happy with that, we just click save, and after the save we'll be able to see the transaction journal. So once you click save, you can see there's a new button will be open here. It's called more, and you have to click the more and click transaction journal to look at the difference between these two transactions. Remember that both bill will create the supplier as a creditor anyway, but I need to know it is a direct cost or indirect cost. So for that reason, One will be the purchase and one will be our expense. So it's very important to understand that, because we have some direct costs and we have some indirect costs. For that reason, you have to make it separate. All right, so let's have a look. What is the transaction journal here? Now I can see our transaction journal here. So we can see here creditor is total amount 1320, and we have a stock asset that is 100, and continuous education that is 1000, and the VAT control 220. So of course this VAT will be recoverable if the company is VAT registered. So our cost is 1000 plus 100, 1100. That's the net. So this is our debit expense. VAT is also debit. On the other hand, creditor is a liability. That's why it is credit. Now this category is stock asset, that will go to the stock, and on the other hand, this is continuing education, that is our expense. Now if we buy something, obviously it will go to the purchase. So this water bottle comes under the stock account. That's why it's on the stock. So you can choose any other account that we like. But at the end, the profit and loss account statement will have no impact for that, unless it will have a choose the category that will have a either from the expense, from the purchase. So it's a very important transaction you need to understand. And also, like if we click any of this, it will show us the balance. So it will take us to there. So for example, if we click on the stock account, it will be open to the new window. And you can see here this product or services here, the water bottle. Now of course, like this sort of thing is only it is important when you have the classification of the expense. Otherwise, like all you have to do, you have to choose the category and you have to say is it expense or income. That will be absolutely fine. For example, if anything you like to spend, if you know it is expense, you have to just make a category and just say the category is expense. That's it. So that's how we can create the bill. Once the bill is ready to go, we can click save and close, or we can do save and new. So if you do save and new, it will take us to the next new bill page, so that if you have more than one bill, we can record it more than one. Let's have a look now the expense. So the expense account is a little bit different than the bills. So let's have a look what we have on the expense. Now if we go back and start with the new transaction, and this time we click the expense. Now expense will tell us like for what reason we paid this money and from which account we have used. We have to say all of this. For example, if we buy some stationery and by using the business credit card, so we have to select all of this so that when you reconcile the bank, it is exactly matched. So from the bank statement, you can see the same amount. So for example, it's a PAY to whom we paid. We can choose post office, we can choose any of the supplier. If we don't have one, we can add one from here. So let's say we said we paid to this supplier, Bruce Coons, and from which account I paid. Let's say from the business debit card, credit card, whichever you like to choose, you can choose from there. And when did you make the payment, and what is the payment method? You can say cash, card, whatever it is. Then you can say reference number. This is the voucher number. You can say like 555. It's just example. You can choose any voucher number you have. Now the category, of course, like expense have a lot of thing. You know why you're paying for. You need to know that. For example, if you paid for insurance expense, you can choose the insurance, and you have to write the description. You can say like this is the interest fee for the insurance. Whatever you paid for, you can write the description. So to understand more, then you have to write the amount. Let's say the amount is 500. And if there is any VAT, you have to enter the VAT. If you want to say the VAT standard 20%, you can say 20%. Or if you want to say now VAT is already inside of 500, so you can always make the inclusive VAT. So inclusive VAT will make like everything 500. So let's say if I say no VAT, and if I just said 500, and that will make us 500 inclusive VAT. So VAT is already inside. So that's how like we can create the expense. Then you can go to the class, and of course on the class section you can see so if we go here, the class, so you can choose the class. So if there anything is already here, you can choose the class. Otherwise you can just add the new class of that. For example, this expense you spend for, let's say, a promotional item or for anything, you can always write it down here. It will help you to identify for what reason you paid this expense. Alright, so once we are happy, all you have to do, we have to click the save. And if I like to attach any receipt with that, for example, if you make a payment, if you have a receipt or something if you like to add, you can click the attachment. You can keep the receipt with this transactions. In future, if you like to see the receipt, you can always download from here and you can print it out. And that's how we can do save and then close. If you think like this transaction, this insurance you have to pay every month, you can always select to make automated transaction. Is called make recurring. So if you make the make recurring, it will ask you like every month when you need to make the payment, so after what days. So recurring expense, so they said like type, so you can say reminder or schedule, unschedule. You can choose schedule and create which day in advance, so you can say like 1 day in advance, 2 day in advance, whatever it is. And the interval, it could be monthly, weekly, daily, the way you want. And on which day of each month, you can see that every month for how long and when it will be ended. So if you want to create for 1 year, you can always create for 1 year, it will be ended after that. So this will give you the option, so automatically you can basically create the transaction. You don't have to do it every month manually for that insurance payment or something. If any sort of expense, it will go every month. For example, the rent, if you pay the rent every month, so you really don't have to create the bill for rent for the every month. You can do the accrued expense, so it will go automatically from your bank. Let's say the money will go by standing order or direct debit, and the bills will be automatically created on the QuickBook if you give them the instruction for 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, how long you want. So that's how we can save some time if you know the transaction for which date and how much is the amount. Normally if the amount is fixed, you can always do that. All right, this is our story of the expense. And then obviously, like, there are a few more things that we already discussed, like for this expense section, we have a check, we have a purchase order, and supplier credit. So this is not a very usual item that we use every day. The main two section, we need to see the bill and expense that we have to record once we receive once you make an order from the supplier, or if you paid for any expenses.